My father raised his champagne glass and smiled at a room full of people who thought they knew us. It was their 40th wedding anniversary. White roses, gold candles, a string quartet in the corner. 80 guests seated under the same crystal chandeliers my mother had bragged about for months. I had chosen those roses. I had approved those table linens. I had fixed the seating chart twice because my mother kept changing her mind about who deserved to be closer to the head table. By the time dinner was served, my feet were burning. My mascara had started to sting my eyes, and I still had not eaten more than half a dinner roll in the kitchen. But I was used to that. I was always used to that. My name is Julia Mercer. I was 34 years old that night, and for most of my life, my family had trained me to confuse usefulness with love. My parents, Richard and Denise Mercer, owned a wedding venue outside Knoxville called Cedar Hill House. Old brick mansion, white columns, lake behind it. The kind of place that looked beautiful in photographs and exhausting in real life. People thought my parents built it together. What they really built was a system. My mother handled appearances. My father handled charm. My younger brother Ethan handled being adored. I handled everything else. That anniversary party was supposed to celebrate them. Instead, it became the last night I was ever their daughter in the way they wanted me to be. My father tapped his glass again. The room quieted. He put an arm around my mother and gave her the warm public smile he saved for donors, pastors, and people whose opinion he wanted to keep. 40 years, he said. 40 years of marriage, family, sacrifice, and blessings. A few guests sighed. My mother lowered her eyes like she was touched. She wasn't. She already knew every word of the speech. She had edited it that morning while I steamed napkins in the back office. And to mark this milestone, my father said, "We have one more surprise." My mother's smile widened. Across the room, Ethan reached for his wife Lila's hand. They both looked smug in that way people do when they already know they're about to receive something. I was standing near the service doors, one hand still wrapped around a tray I had forgotten to set down. My father lifted his glass higher. "Next Friday, we're taking the whole family to Italy for 2 weeks. Florence, Lake Como, and Rome. A proper celebration." The room erupted. People clapped. My mother laughed like a girl. Lila put a hand to her chest and squealed. Even Ethan looked impressed, and very little impressed Ethan unless it came with status attached. I just stood there for a second. Stunned. Italy. I had not taken a vacation in 6 years, not a real one. Not one where I was not answering vendor texts, watching someone else's child, or fixing some problem my family had created and labeled an emergency. For one foolish second, I let myself imagine it. A hotel room with the windows open, coffee somewhere no one could find me, a dinner where I sat down before the food got cold. I stepped a little closer. "What day are we leaving?" I asked. I did not say it loudly. I did not say it greedily. I just asked a question. My father looked at me. Then he looked at my mother. It was a small look, a practiced one. The kind that said they had already decided something and only needed a second to enjoy the moment before saying it out loud. My mother took the microphone from him. "Julia," she said, with that soft public voice she used when she wanted to sound kind in front of witnesses, "you won't need the travel details." A few people laughed lightly, not understanding. I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" I asked. My mother's smile tightened. "It means you're not coming." The room changed. It was subtle at first. A shift in posture. A pause in breathing. Silverware settling against china. I remember every second of it. My father took the microphone back, as if this part needed masculine authority. "Someone has to stay behind and manage Cedar Hill," he said, "and Ethan and Lila deserve a real break with the kids." It only made sense. He said it so easily, like I was a scheduling decision, not a daughter, not even a person, just the one who stayed. My face went hot. I looked at Ethan. He did not look embarrassed. He looked relieved. Lila leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered, "Julia's better at the venue stuff anyway." Better at the venue stuff. That was what my life had become. My mother gave a tiny shrug into the microphone, almost playful. "Let's be honest," she said, and I can still hear her voice. Julia was never the one we pictured in Italy. A few people looked down at their plates. Someone near the back let out a nervous laugh. My father added, "And frankly, she's the only one responsible enough to work while the rest of us enjoy ourselves." There it was, the line they crossed. Not just excluding me, displaying my place, publicly, cleanly, deliberately. I do not remember setting down the tray. I do remember hearing one woman whisper, "Oh my God." I remember my cousin Melissa staring at me with her mouth open. I remember the violinist stopping for half a beat before picking back up again. And I remember my mother smiling at the room and saying, "Now, who wants dessert?" That was the moment I understood something with a clarity so sharp it almost calmed me. They were not ashamed. They were proud, proud of how little they thought they owed me, proud of how sure they were that I would stay anyway, because I always had, because I always cleaned up the mess and came back for more, because for years they had mistaken my endurance for permission. I heard myself say, "Of course." It was strange how steady my voice sounded. My father relaxed immediately. My mother smiled like the unpleasantness had passed. Ethan looked back down at his plate. That hurt more than if he had smirked. I turned away before anyone could see my face. I walked through the service doors, past the kitchen, past the floral cooler, past the office, where I had spent half my 20s fixing my parents' business without ever being named part of it. I locked myself in the inventory room and sat down on an unopened box of votive candles. For a full minute, I did nothing. Then I opened my purse. Inside was a navy envelope. Inside that envelope was a contract. I had been carrying it with me all week, waiting for the right moment to sign it. A job offer, an apartment, a new life in Oregon. 2 years of work no one in my family knew I had built. I stared at the envelope in the dim little room that smelled like ribbon and dust and dried eucalyptus. And for the first time in my life, I did not think, "How do I fix this?" I thought, "I'm done." Not angry, not dramatic, just done. Out in the ballroom, people were laughing again. The party had recovered. My humiliation had become background music. But something irreversible had happened. My parents thought they had assigned me my place for the next 2 weeks. They had no idea they had just ended my place in their lives for good. If you had asked my mother, she would have told you I was the dependable one. It sounded like praise. In our family, it meant available. It meant flexible. It meant the person whose plans could always be moved because apparently her plans were never real enough to count. Ethan was the golden child in a quiet, socially acceptable way. Not because he was brilliant, not because he was kind, mostly because he reflected well on them. He was handsome, easy with people, sold commercial real estate and talked like every lunch was important, married Lila, who had excellent hair, expensive taste, and a talent for sounding overwhelmed while doing very little. They had twin girls who were 6 and already knew I would tie their shoes faster than their mother. At Cedar Hill House, my official title was Operations Assistant. It sounded temporary. It had lasted 11 years. I did vendor coordination, staffing, invoices, emergency fixes, ceremony transitions, linen counts, liquor deliveries, insurance renewals, and every ugly conversation no one else wanted. If a bride cried, I handled it. If a toilet backed up during cocktail hour, I handled it. If a caterer quit 2 days before a wedding, I handled it. If my mother forgot she had promised 3 different families the same spring Saturday, I handled that too. My father liked to tell people the venue was a family business. What he meant was that my labor had no clean boundaries. When I was 26, I once asked if we could formalize my role. Benefits, a title, a percentage, something that acknowledged reality. My father laughed and said, "Don't get corporate on me, Jules. This is family." Family. It was their favorite discount code. My mother used it when she needed an extra 14 hours from me. My father used it when I asked for clarity. Ethan used it when he needed something done fast and for free. The thing no one understood was that I was not weak. I was tired, yes. Conditioned, absolutely. But not weak. I had simply spent too long believing that loyalty would eventually become love if I performed it well enough. That illusion started cracking 2 years before the anniversary, not because of one giant betrayal. Because of a Tuesday in April, a storm had knocked out power at Cedar Hill during a rehearsal dinner. I rerouted the caterer, found backup lighting, calmed the bride, moved the event into the carriage house, and saved the entire evening. The bride's mother hugged me crying and said, "You're the only reason tonight happened." I smiled and went looking for my parents. Because for once, I wanted them to hear it. I found them on the side patio with Ethan and Lila. They were laughing. My father had his hand on Ethan's shoulder. "He's the one who'll take Cedar Hill to the next level," he was saying. "Julia keeps the wheels on, but Ethan has the vision." I stood there with rainwater still drying on my sleeves and realized two things at once. First, they knew exactly what I did. Second, it still did not count. That night I went home, opened my laptop, and updated a resume I had not touched in years. I did it quietly. The way women do a lot of important things when they have learned not to announce a move until it is safe. I started consulting after hours. At first, it was small. A barn venue in Kentucky with scheduling problems. An inn outside Asheville that kept losing money on weddings because no one had built proper vendor systems. I created timelines, staffing plans, pricing structures, emergency manuals. I used a shortened form of my name, J. Mercer. Neutral enough, professional enough. No one connected it to me. The work spread. Not fast, not glamorous, but steadily. By the end of the first year, I had 4 regular clients. By the middle of the second, I had 7. One of them was a woman named Eleanor Shaw, who owned a historic inn outside Portland called Alder Ridge House. It was beautiful in a way Cedar Hill never was, not because the building was grander, because the place had honesty in it. Warm wood floors, rain on cedar roofs, staff who looked like they were allowed to sit down. Eleanor was in her 60s, sharp without being cruel, and the first person in business who ever asked me a question my family never had. "What do you want?" I remember laughing when she asked. Not because it was funny, because I genuinely did not know. She was the one who pushed hardest when I fixed her event systems and tripled her fall bookings in 8 months. "You should be running a property," she told me over Zoom one night. "Not keeping one afloat for people who don't even put your name on the website." I did not tell her she was right. I just kept working. Then, 4 weeks before my parents' anniversary, Eleanor called and said she was semi-retiring. She wanted a managing director, housing included, full salary, profit share after year 1. She wanted me. I sat at my kitchen table after that call and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I cried. Not loud, not broken, just the kind of crying that happens when a locked door inside you finally opens. The contract arrived 2 days later. I read twice. It was real. A salary higher than I had ever made. Health insurance, decision-making authority, a renovated apartment over the carriage house at Alder Ridge, and my name, printed clearly where my position would be. Managing Director. Julia Mercer. I did not sign right away. I wish I could tell you that was because I was being strategic. The truth is, I was still trying to make room for hope. Hope that maybe my family would change. Hope that, maybe if I told them carefully enough, they would see what this meant. Hope that after years of making myself useful, I had finally earned being considered. That was the foolishness I carried into the anniversary week. I helped plan every detail of that party. I worked 18-hour days. I covered for staff callouts. I dealt with my mother's panic over centerpieces. I picked up Ethan's tux from the tailor because he forgot. I even ordered the custom lemon cake my parents liked from a bakery 40 minutes away because my mother said the local one tasted middle class. The whole time, the envelope stayed in my purse, a quiet future pressing against my side. Then came the speech. Then came Italy. Then came the microphone. And suddenly, every hopeful part of me went still. After I sat in the inventory room for a while, I went back out. Not because I wanted to, because disappearing would have turned me into the problem. I knew that pattern too well. So I moved through the rest of the evening like a ghost with excellent posture. I Directed servers. I boxed extra cake. I found someone's lost shawl. No one mentioned what had happened. That was the worst part. How quickly public cruelty can become private inconvenience for everyone except the person it lands on. Around 11:30, while I was closing out bar invoices in the office, Ethan came in. He loosened his tie and leaned against the doorframe like we were allies. "Hey," he said. "Don't make this weird." I looked up slowly. "Make what weird?" "The Italy thing." I actually smiled at that, not kindly, just in disbelief. "You mean the part where Mom told a room full of people I wasn't the daughter she pictured on vacation?" He sighed. "It's not like that." "Then how is it?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Julia, come on. You know you're better at handling things here than I am. And the girls are comfortable with you." "Lila really needs a break." I stared at him. There are moments when someone says exactly who they are without meaning to. This was one of them. Not once did he say I was hurt. Not once did he say our parents were wrong. Only that I was useful and his wife was tired. I closed the invoice folder. "You all really thought I'd stay?" He frowned. "Well, yeah. Like it was obvious. Like gravity. Like weather." I nodded once. Then I said, "Get out of my office." His expression changed. Not to guilt, to irritation. That told me everything I needed. He left without another word. At 12:17 after the last rental van pulled away and the venue went quiet, I went upstairs to my mother's private office to drop off the final receipts. The desk lamp was still on. Her laptop was open. I should have set the folder down and walked away. Instead, I saw my name in the subject line of an email thread. "Julia, Italy coverage." I went cold. I clicked. The first email was from my mother to my father, Ethan, and Lila. "If Julia starts acting emotional at the party, do not engage. She always calms down once she has work to do." The second was from Lila. "I'll send the girls routine. Honestly, this solves a huge problem for us. She doesn't have much else going on anyway." Then Ethan. "She'll complain for a minute and then do what she always does." And finally, from my father. "That's why Denise and I waited to tell her publicly. Harder for her to make a scene when there are witnesses." I read that line 4 times. Harder for her to make a scene when there are witnesses. It had been planned. Not only the exclusion, the humiliation, the room, the microphone, the timing. I took photos of every email. My hands were steady now. Not shaking. Steady. Then I set the folder on the desk, turned off the lamp, and walked out of that office as calmly as if I had just finished another shift. When I got home, I put the contract on my kitchen table. I signed every page. Then I booked a one-way flight to Portland for Tuesday morning. While my family packed for Italy, I packed for the rest of my life. I did not leave a note. After years of over-explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me, I had lost interest in written speeches. I spent Sunday and Monday doing only what was necessary. I transferred client files. I sent Eleanor the signed contract. I arranged movers for the few pieces of furniture worth keeping. I boxed books, clothes, dishes, and one framed photograph of my grandmother that had always belonged to me even when it sat in my mother's hallway. I did not answer my phone. I let it ring and ring across the counter while I wrapped plates in newspaper and folded sweaters into suitcases. By Monday afternoon, the voicemails had started. First, my mother. "Julia, call me back. We need to finalize staff coverage before we leave." Not. "Are you all right?" Not. "We need to talk about what happened." Staff coverage. Then my father. "Your mother is upset. Don't drag this out." As if I were performing. As if hurt had a time limit. Ethan texted after that. "Need your itinerary for the girls this week." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned my phone over and kept packing. Tuesday morning, 3 hours before my flight, I drove to Cedar Hill one last time. Not to say goodbye. To return the master keys. It was raining. The kind of fine gray rain that makes everything look tired. My parents were in the front hall with 2 open suitcases and a pile of garment bags. My mother was issuing instructions to one of the housekeepers while my father checked printed travel documents like the internet had personally offended him. Ethan and Lila were in the breakfast room with the girls. It looked busy, normal, prepared, like my absence had not yet registered as a structural problem. My mother saw me first. "There you are," she said. "I've been trying to reach you. We need to go over the wedding this Saturday." I held up the keyring. "I'm not working Saturday." She blinked. "What?" "I'm not covering Cedar Hill while you're gone. I'm not watching the girls. I'm not handling emergencies. I'm not doing any of it." Ethan stood up from the breakfast room. Lila came to the doorway behind him. My father lowered his papers slowly. My mother gave a short laugh. "Julia, this is not the time." "No," I said. "The time was Saturday night, before you embarrassed me in front of 80 people. But since you were all comfortable doing that publicly, I assume we can do this plainly too." The housekeeper disappeared so fast I almost admired it. My father's face hardened. Enough with the drama. I looked at him. Then I took my phone out and read his email aloud. "That's why Denise and I waited to tell her publicly. Harder for her to make a scene when there are witnesses." No one moved. No one spoke. For once, silence did not belong to me. My mother went pale first, then angry. "You went through my email?" I laughed once. It was not a pleasant sound. "That's your concern? You violated my privacy. You staged my humiliation." My father stepped forward. "If you are trying to punish this family, you're being ridiculous." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm resigning." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "From what?" That almost broke me. Not because it was cruel, because it was so honest. From what? From the role none of them had ever had the decency to name. I looked at him and said, "Exactly." Lila folded her arms. "So what now? You just disappear because your feelings got hurt?" I turned to her. "My feelings didn't get hurt. I got clarity. That landed. I could see it. The difference between a woman begging to be included and a woman who had finally understood the system. My mother changed tactics then. She always did when control slipped." Her voice softened. Her eyes filled. "Julia," she said, "we have all sacrificed for this family. I know you're emotional right now, but leaving over one misunderstanding, it wasn't one misunderstanding. I set the keys on the entry table. It was years. Saturday was just the first time you said it into a microphone." The twins came into the hall then, confused by the tension. One of them, Ava, reached for my hand on instinct. That nearly undid me. I crouched and kissed both girls on the forehead. "I love you," I told them. "This is not because of you." Lila bristled at that. But I was no longer speaking to her. When I stood up, my father asked, "Where are you going?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Oregon." My mother gave a little scoff. "For what?" "For my job." No one spoke. So I said it again, slower. "My job." Ethan frowned. "At some venue thing?" I could have explained. I could have told them about the consulting, the clients, the offer, the salary, the apartment, the years of work I had done after midnight while they assumed I had nothing else going on. But I suddenly understood I did not need them educated, only informed. "Yes," I said. "At some venue thing." My mother's voice sharpened. "And you made this decision without discussing it with us?" That was the moment I knew I would not come back. Not because she was cruel, because even now, after everything, she still thought my life required committee approval. I picked up my bag. "My flight is in 3 hours," I said. "You should probably start calling people. Saturday's wedding still needs a floor plan." Then I walked out. My father called after me once. "Julia, if you leave like this, don't expect things to be the same when you come back." Rain tapped against my windshield as I opened the car door. I turned around. For years I had rehearsed versions of this moment in my head. Sharp speeches, perfect lines, some devastating sentence that would make them finally feel what they had done. But when it came, the truth was simpler. "I'm counting on that," I said. Then I got in my car and drove away. The airport felt unreal. People rolling suitcases, buying coffee, complaining about delays, existing inside ordinary little inconveniences while my entire life peeled away behind me. On the plane, I did something I had not done in years. Nothing. No rescue texts, no staff schedules, no damage control, just a tray table, a window, and clouds. I landed in Portland under a sheet of silver rain that made Tennessee feel very far away. A driver from Alder Ridge House met me at arrivals holding a sign with my name on it. My name. Not Julia plus a task. Not Julia because no one else could do it. Just my name. The drive to the inn took 40 minutes. Tall pines, wet roads, dark green hills. By the time we pulled through the stone gates, my chest hurt with a feeling I did not trust yet. The inn was lit up against the rain. Warm windows, cedar siding, lanterns near the path. Beautiful, yes. But more than that, it felt inhabited, not staged. Eleanor met me under the front awning in a navy coat and boots. She hugged me once, firmly, like she was greeting an adult she respected. Not a problem she intended to manage. "You made it," she said. I nodded. I did. She took one look at my face and did not ask for the whole story. Only said, "Good. Come inside. We saved you soup." I almost cried right there on the stone steps. Not because I was weak, because kindness without agenda can feel unbearable when you are not used to it. That first night, I stood in the apartment over the carriage house and looked at the keys in my hand. My own front door, my own office downstairs, my own life. Not borrowed, not assigned, not conditional. Then my phone buzzed. 6 missed calls from my mother, 3 from Ethan, 2 from my father, 1 text from Lila. "You are unbelievably selfish." I blocked them all. Then I opened the windows. And for the first time in my life, I slept without setting an alarm for someone else's emergency. The strange thing about leaving is that the first relief does not feel noble. It feels practical. No one calling your name from another room. No one. Assuming your Saturday belongs to them. No one making you explain why fatigue counts if it comes from work they don't respect. At Alder Ridge, my days were full, but they were mine. I reviewed budgets in the morning, walked the grounds with maintenance after breakfast, met brides in the library and corporate retreat clients on the terrace. I hired 2 new coordinators, rewrote vendor policies, and fixed a kitchen scheduling issue that had been causing staff turnover for months. When I made a decision, it held. When I stayed late, it was because I chose to. When someone thanked me, it did not sound surprised. 3 weeks after I arrived, Eleanor came into my office with a mug of coffee and a look I would come to recognize as trouble mixed with amusement. "Your family found the website," she said. I stared at her. "How do you know?" "Because your mother called the front desk pretending to inquire about a winter wedding and then demanded to speak to ownership about my managing director stealing her family's business methods." I closed my eyes. "Of course she did." Eleanor set the mug down. For the record, I told her that if she raised her voice at my staff again, I would hang up. Then I did. I laughed for the first time that day. What did she want? What all controlling people want when their old system stops working: access. I should say here that Cedar Hill did not collapse the second I left. That would be too neat, too cinematic. What happened was slower and, in some ways, more satisfying. Things started slipping. A bridal party posted a bad review about late setup, then another about missing place cards. A florist I had managed for years refused a last-minute change because apparently my mother had finally found out vendors did not accept, but were old family friends as a payment system. One Saturday, a bartender quit halfway through a reception because my father screamed at him in front of guests. Without me smoothing edges, the edges became visible. People who had spent years looking polished on my labor suddenly had to stand inside their own competence. It was not enough. I did not seek updates. They came anyway. Former staff texted. Old vendors called. My cousin Melissa sent me screenshots of review sites with no commentary at all, which I appreciated more than sympathy. Then, 6 weeks after I left, Alder Ridge hosted its fall showcase. It was our biggest industry event of the season. Planners, photographers, florists, travel editors, corporate clients. About 60 people circulating through the property, champagne on the terrace, live quartet in the great room, sample menus set in the dining hall, my event, my staff, my name on the printed welcome cards. I wore a dark green dress and low heels and moved through the evening with that focused calm I used to waste on my family. It was just after 7 when the front desk assistant came to find me. "Julia," she said quietly, "there's a group here asking for you." Something in her face made my stomach drop. I walked to the lobby. My parents were standing by the stone fireplace. Ethan was with them. So was Lila. No children this time. No distractions. Just 4 people who had flown across the country because the old methods were no longer getting results. My mother looked expensive and furious. My father looked tired. Ethan looked embarrassed to be there, which was probably the closest he ever got to shame. Lila looked annoyed that the room was not arranged around her crisis. For a second, no one moved. Then my mother said, "Well, this is certainly dramatic." I almost smiled. "You flew to Oregon." "We had no choice," my father said. That interested me. No choice. I folded my hands in front of. "This isn't a good time." "That's rich," Ethan muttered. "You know how much trouble you left behind?" There it was again, as if leaving exploitation was an administrative inconvenience. My mother stepped closer. "You made your point. It's time to stop this. Stop this." Like boundaries were a performance with an end date. I looked at each of them in turn. The lobby around us had gone still in that quiet, professional way people get when they sense something important and do not want to be caught, obviously staring. Alder Ridge staff did not gawk. They simply noticed. I had spent enough of my life being cornered in private. I was not interested in that. "Tonight." "If you have something to say," I said, "you can say it here." My mother inhaled sharply. "This is family business." "No," I said. "Family business was what you called unpaid labor. This is my workplace." That hit harder than I expected. Maybe because it was the first time I had said those 2 words out loud with full confidence. My workplace. My father shifted. "Cedar Hill is in trouble." I said nothing. He continued anyway. "We've lost 3 coordinators. 2 major clients pulled deposits. We have a tax issue from last quarter because apparently you were handling more than we realized." "Apparently." Ethan cut in, voice tight. "And Lila's due in 6 weeks. We need stability." I looked at him. Not coldly, just clearly. "So you came here because you need me." No one denied it. That was almost funny. Lila tried next. "Julia, nobody is saying mistakes weren't made." "Mistakes? What a useful word for people who want mercy without accountability." She pressed on. "But dragging this out helps no one. The girls ask about you." Ethan stressed. "Your parents are exhausted. Maybe it's time to let everyone move on." Move on. As if moving on meant stepping back into the exact role that broke me. I heard footsteps behind me and knew, without turning, that Eleanor had arrived. She did not interrupt. She just stood there, solid as a wall. My mother noticed her and changed her tone instantly. Softer, politer, public. "We simply want our daughter back." That line might have worked on another audience. Not this one. Not with my office visible across the hall, and my staff 2 rooms away, and my name on the showcase. Materials tucked under half the guests' arms. I looked at my mother and said, "You don't want your daughter back. You want your system back." The silence after that was deep. It carried. My father's jaw tightened. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I took a breath. I had promised myself when I left that if this moment ever came, I would not scream. I would not plead. I would not list every cut they had ever made and call it evidence. I would speak once, plainly, and let the truth stand on its own legs. "You excluded me from your anniversary trip in front of 80 guests because public pressure made it harder for me to object," I said. "You planned that in emails. Ethan and Lila assumed I would give up my life because none of you believed I had one. Then when I left, none of you called to apologize. You called to ask where the staffing files were. My mother's face flushed. That is not all we did. No, I said. You also called me selfish. A few heads had turned now at the end of the corridor. A planner I had met earlier was pretending to study a floral installation while very clearly listening. Good. Let them. Here. Not because I wanted spectacle, because shame thrives in secrecy, and I had hidden theirs long enough. Ethan lowered his voice. What do you want from us? That question landed in me like a stone dropped into still water, because for years I would have answered it in tasks: a title, a salary, respect, apology, inclusion, equity. But standing there in the warm, clean lobby of a place I had helped build without disappearing inside it, I realized something new. I did not want anything from them. That was the freedom. I want nothing, I said. All four of them stared at me. My mother actually looked confused. What does that even mean? It means I'm not negotiating my return. I'm not consulting for Cedar Hill. I'm not covering your events remotely. I'm not flying back for the baby. I'm not stepping into any role that depends on me being less than fully human. Lila opened her mouth, closed it. My father tried authority one last time. You are abandoning your family. I shook my head. No. I'm leaving a job I was never allowed to name. He went still. That was the line that reached him. Maybe because it was true. Maybe because some part of him had always known. Eleanor stepped beside me. Then, not in front, not over me, just beside me. Mr. Mercer, she said evenly, Julia has a showcase to run. If you continue disrupting guests, I will have to ask you to leave. My mother looked insulted. We flew across the country. And yet, Eleanor said, you're still expected to behave. I almost loved her for that. My mother turned back to me with sudden wet eyes. The old move, the one meant to make me feel like the aggressor. After everything we gave you, she said softly, this is how you repay us? There are questions that keep women trapped for years. That one had lived in me a long time. After everything we gave you, I answered it calmly. You gave me responsibilities, I said. You called them love. Then I stepped back. Please, leave. My father stared at me for one long second. Then something in his face settled. Not understanding, not remorse. Just recognition that the usual doors were closed. He put a hand on my mother's arm. We're done here. Ethan looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't. Lila turned first, angry and small at once. My mother let my father guide her toward the entrance, but halfway there she stopped and looked over her shoulder. You'll regret this someday. Maybe she believed that. Maybe she needed to. I thought about the inventory room, the microphone, the 80 guests, the emails, the sleep I had gotten since leaving, the keys in my apartment upstairs, the way my own voice sounded now. No, I said. I already regret staying as long as I did. Then they left. Not with a scene, not with a collapse, just four figures disappearing into the Oregon rain. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then the planner by the floral display came over and said, very gently, your timing on the reception flow earlier was excellent, by the way. I laughed, sudden and helpless. It broke the tension. The room started breathing again. A server passed with champagne. Someone asked about winter booking dates. Music resumed its place in the air. My life kept going. And that, more than anything, felt like justice. The showcase ended at 10:30. We booked 3 corporate retreats, 2 weddings, and a holiday buyout before the last guests left. When the staff finally started stacking glasses and clearing plates, I walked out onto the back terrace alone. Rain still clung to the railings. The lawn below shone dark and wet under the lights. For a long minute, I just stood there, not trembling, not replaying every word, just standing in the quiet after something final. Eleanor joined me a minute later with 2 mugs of tea. She handed me one and leaned on the choir railing. You okay? I thought about it. Then I said, yes. And for once, It was not the automatic yes women use when they do not want to be a burden. It was true. The next few months were not magically easy. That is the part people skip when they want a clean ending. I still woke up some mornings with guilt sitting on my chest before I fully opened my eyes. I still reached for my phone some Saturdays, expecting 12 emergencies that no longer belonged to me. I still had moments, especially around the holidays, when I wondered if I had been too cold, too firm, too unwilling to leave a door open. Then I would remember the microphone, or the emails, or the way my mother asked what job I could possibly have without first wondering whether I was happy. And the guilt would loosen. Distance helped. Time helped. 2. So did work that had shape and consequence and reward. At Alder Ridge, we had our best winter season in 12 years. We launched weekday corporate packages that filled the slow months. I introduced fair vendor contracts and lost none of the good people. Staff turnover dropped. Revenue. Eleanor officially retired in February and turned over more authority than planned. Because, as she put it, I'm old enough to know when someone else is already doing the job. The apartment upstairs slowly became mine. Books on the windowsill, wool blanket on the chair by the radiator, a blue ceramic bowl from a local maker where I dropped my keys at night. No one else had input. No one else had a claim. In March, the twins turned 7. I mailed them each a book and a puzzle. Lila texted a curt thank you with a photo. I replied with a heart and nothing else. That was all I had to give. My father emailed twice that. Winter. The first was practical. He wanted passwords for an old vendor database I had already transferred before leaving. I sent them through a secure link and did not add a personal note. The second came 3 weeks later. It was short. Julia, I should not have let that happen at the anniversary. Your mother and I handled it badly. I know that is not enough. Dad, I read it 6 times. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk in the rain. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I needed to feel the weather on my face while I decided what that apology meant. In the end, I answered the next day. Thank you for saying it. I'm doing well here. I hope you are too. Julia. Nothing more. That was the relationship we had now. Measured, real, no false closeness. To hide old damage. My mother never apologized. That did not surprise me. Some people would rather lose a daughter than surrender the story they tell about themselves. Ethan texted once in April asking if I had recommendations for a venue director. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I sent 3 names from Tennessee and 1 line beneath them. Please do not contact me for labor again. He wrote back. Understood. I believed him exactly halfway, but halfway was still more honesty than we had ever had. By summer, Alder Ridge had expanded into full retreat programming, and Eleanor offered me equity 6 months earlier than my contract required. I signed that one immediately, not because I had become fearless, because I had learned the difference between hesitation, self-betrayal. One evening in late June, after a wedding rehearsal dinner had gone smoothly and the grounds had gone quiet, I unlocked my office and sat alone for a few minutes. The lamp pooled soft light across the desk, my desk. There was a framed staff photo on one side and next year's bookings on the other. In the drawer sat the old master key from Cedar Hill. I had kept it by accident at first, tucked into the bottom of a box I unpacked months after arriving. When I found it, I almost mailed it back. Then I didn't. I think some part of me knew I needed to keep it until it meant nothing. That night, I took it out and set it in my palm. Heavy little thing. So much of my life had hung from keys like that. Access, obligation, emergency, duty. Doors I could open for everyone except myself. I carried it outside to the maintenance shed where old metal waited for recycling and dropped it into the bin. It made one small, final sound. Then it was gone. A week later, I got a formal invitation in the mail. Cedar Hill House was celebrating its 50th year as a property with a gala fundraiser and family legacy presentation. My mother's name was embossed on the envelope in gold. No note inside, no personal message, just an assumption that time had softened me back into position. I smiled when I saw it. Then I put it through the office shredder. Not angrily, not theatrically. just efficiently. That is what freedom started to look like after a while. Not grand speeches, not revenge fantasies, not even dramatic no's. Just a life built sturdy enough that the old hooks no longer held. Sometimes people ask if I miss them. The honest answer is this: I miss the idea of what family should have been. I miss the version of my mother who might have looked at me in that ballroom and chosen kindness. I miss the brother who might have stood up and said, "Actually, that's wrong." I miss the father who could have used the microphone to thank me instead of place me. But I do not miss the role. I do not miss being the woman everyone admired for enduring what they would never accept for themselves. I do not miss being needed more than I was loved. The night my parents crossed the line was not the worst night of my life. For a while, I thought it was, but now I know better. It was the clearest night of my life. It was the night they finally said the quiet part out loud. And because they did, I stopped mistaking survival for belonging. I left. I built something else. I never went back. And that was the first loyal thing I had ever done for myself.